Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kira Wackett, and I am honored to be sitting here with my very dear friend, Morgan, talking about a super important topic, the seemingly non-decision decision that many of us face in life as to whether or not we want to have kids. So before I dive into what we're talking about, I want to share a little bit more with you about who we're talking to today. Morgan is honestly one of the kindest and most energetic souls I've ever met. She owns her own cleaning business and has been cleaning houses for about 10 years. And in her work and honestly in her personal life, she's a collector of people because she loves to know, like truly know. Like I ask a question and I listen to your response type knowing, and every aspect of learning about other people. Being open and vulnerable is something she works hard at every day as it's important to her and how she wants to show up in the world. She centers herself on the idea of balance and seeing how to make meaning out of life while putting in the hard work to make an impact and have fun along the way. So speaking of vulnerable, this topic is one that requires significant vulnerability. As I mentioned, she and I are going to dive into the personal decision of whether or not to have kids. I'm sure we'll hit on the patriarchy and sexism in the process, even if just in the periphery, but also some of the things that have made Morgan's own journey with this decision unique to her and her partner. We're going to get into some of the nuances of this discussion, and in no way are we attempting to ignore the privilege inherent in making a choice on whether or not to have kids, a choice not all get to make, or the uncertainties of one's body and being able to get pregnant and birth a child, or the very real and fucked up realities regarding women's and abortion's rights in the US. This isn't the topic of today's episode, but hopefully one day that's something that we'll dive into. Today, we're talking about the decision people face as they get older and run through that checklist handed to us at birth that tells us everything we have to do to be successful or the route to a full life, and what happens when we hit pause long enough to really consider if those boxes fit for us. Morgan, I love you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. As I'm prepping for this and just considering this discussion, I'm so honored you're the person I get to talk about this super important topic with.
Thank you for having me. I love you too, Kira.
Okay, so I've been starting every episode with doing a one-word check-in. So if you could tell me right now in this moment, what is one word you would use to describe how you're feeling right now?
Anxious.
I get it.
A little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Actually, I do feel a little less anxious now beginning to talk to you, but curious. I'll say curious.
Yeah. I mean, if it helps to know, you know this, I'm a person that lives in a chronic state of anxiety. I always feel anxious coming into these, even with, there's ones that I have on my calendar of people like you, where I talk to you guys all the time. We have conversations, we have deep conversations. And then I look at it on my calendar, like, oh my gosh, we're recording this for a podcast and everyone's going to hear it. And then the performance anxiety kicks in. And then you just have to take a breath and be like, it's okay to feel that because this is important to me.
Yes.
Not for the sake of the podcast, like, yeah, sure, I really care about this, but it's important to me because I want to have these meaningful conversations. I think back to, what was that, like 5-6 years ago? I think we hadn't even moved to Portland yet. Remember when we were all at that bar?
Yes.
We were down in the bank vault. Yes. And I was like, this is my favorite place to be. And so for those of you listening that were not in the bank vault with us, it was a restaurant bar, and they converted an old bank space into this cool bar lounge area. And we just sat there. I think it was just there was 8 of us, I think. Jonathan was there. Yeah.
Yep.
And we just sat there going through these really deep questions together. And I could feel when I get those little dopamine hits, they're in the front of my brain, and it feels like somebody went in there with a duster and they're just like tickling it a little bit. And I felt it the whole time. And so I'm just excited we get to do that. But the anxiety is also, those moments are so precious. And so yes. I just want us to be able to be in them. So
I'll put myself back in the bank vault because I remember that so well. I remember sitting in a crowded bar with drinks all around us and people all around us. And the second that moment started happening, everything disappeared. So
and I think it was like a heavy hip hop night too, which obviously is a jam we can get into, but it was like people dancing. Yeah, it was like later into the night. So there's definitely a lot more like it's packed and the movement. And we're all just sitting there talking about our feelings and very real things. And so
pretty powerful.
So tell me, because it's a super hard topic to talk about. It's also, I think, a hard topic to talk about for any woman without feeling like you have to have an answer to this question or to defend a choice that you might make with this question. So I'm curious for you, how did you get to this point where you thought, I want to talk about this? And how do we make sure that you don't feel that way in this discussion?
I think for me personally, this topic is always going to be a journey, I feel like, for women, whether you want it to be or not, because of the outside chatter you get, right? So I think my whole life, I have really considered myself a nurturing person. I've grown up with little siblings, little nieces. Like my whole life, I've kind of just told myself this story that I want to have kids. That's always what I've wanted. I've wanted to do this. And going through a certain situation and having a partner with a child himself who is a teenager now, and kind of like getting to dive into that like role in that way. I think a lot is like I've always thought of myself as like, yes, I'll be a mother one day. And it's been very interesting to feel that shift around this current situation and that shift around people just when they talk to me about, like I'm engaged, or we'll be getting married soon. And like, then all those questions and these assumptions of like, because that's happening, because you bought a house, because you're getting married, you're just going to have kids. And I think it really made me stop and think about like, oh, I've always thought that's what I've wanted. But once people start saying that to you, it's like, is that what I've always wanted?
Right.
Like, is that what I want moving forward? So a lot has shifted that for me personally. When it comes to just the idea of what it means and what it looks like for me now, and kind of, it's interesting to look at it so differently when I thought I was so set in a decision.
Well, it's so, this is where I think we have to tease apart too, like how much of that was ingrained in us to want that. I remember, I don't know if you ever watched The Wedding Planner, one of the many like problematic, but also I still love to watch it, rom-coms of, I think it was probably in the 90s, but it was with Jennifer Lopez. And she's like this little girl talking about how she's going to get married and she just wants to plan this beautiful wedding. And these are things that girls are conditioned to talk about. And I now have a 3-year-old biologically female human. I know that the world has changed a little bit. The way we're talking about things is different, but it wasn't that way when we were little. We were still, boys were taught to talk about cars and getting dirty. And we were talking, and it was like, we're playing house and exactly getting married and doing these things. And so it's the stuff that was kind of indoctrinated in us. And again, the assumptions that are made from the time, people would do that. I remember playing MASH, playing that game. It's like, how many kids are you going to have? Who are you going to get married to? And like planning out how many kids I thought I wanted when I was like 16, like I'm going to have 4, which now having had 1, fuck that. Like,
oh man.
One is a lot some days, but it's that idea. And I think it goes back to that piece of most of us, there's this beauty, but also this pain in what you've gone through of having this experience with your partner and kind of coming into a parent role. And there's the dynamic of being a step parent and sort of the accessory elements of it. You're kind of on the outside, but you're kind of on the inside and all of that. And then getting to kind of experience something, but it's also kind of like coming into a movie in the 80s that's like midway through and it makes no sense. And the graphics kind of suck. And you're like, oh my gosh, these special effects are terrible. I would never watch this again. But you don't even know what happened because you missed the beginning. You didn't get to have a part of any of that. And so you get this little bit of an experience, but it wasn't yours.
Right.
But it was enough for you to do the thing that you had every right to do. And obviously it sounds like maybe a painful route to get there, but you then were able to ask yourself, is this what I want?
Yes.
Do you think the question now came from like a curiosity and a safe sort of exploration, or was it fear driven or somewhere in between?
At first, fear driven, because I think the heaviness of everything we went through, and we can kind of get into that, but I think it was a lot out of fear because of I was just experiencing so much so fast, and put in really trying to lean into the role of stepmom and like all that stuff. And I knew I was comfortable in that role because of previous situations with my partner's child. And I think that it was at first fear, and then it's kind of shifted. And I've never thought or even thought I would have to ask myself, do I want kids? Like, oh, wait, I guess, it's like, it's an interesting thing to be so set on something and then ask yourself that question after experiencing something that kind of rocked that for me. So I think it was like fearful. And then I was like, well, should I be asking myself that right now? Like it was very sudden, I think. And I think as time has passed a little bit now, it shifts more and more. So it's like a little less fear, a little more like, I'm allowed to have these thoughts. I'm allowed to let myself go there and think about that. It's not something I have to be so set on. Like, so that's been an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and it sounds like, you kind of came into this relationship with your partner, with your partner's child of, I've been a nurturer my whole life. I do. I mean, I can say this. I've seen you around my 3-year-old, like, you
love kids.
You love them and you just want them to feel seen. That's a big thing for you, is you want kids to feel seen. And I think there's maybe a part of you that I might be taking a leap, but as someone who does a lot of this myself, I feel like sometimes we know what the experience is like to not be seen or to not be heard or to not be loved in the ways that we believe every child deserves. So we sort of want to exude that. And you do to capital T and beyond. So you come into this role and it's not like you came in thinking like, I know how to do this, I'm going to be amazing. But you came in with a certain degree of confidence and a certain degree of hope and expectation that things would be a certain way. And it wasn't. And so there's this grief in that. And there's this pain in that. And it's losing something, not just the relationship potentially with your stepson, but the relationship that you would have with a future kid, because you just start to see the messiness that I don't think you were ever ignorant of. You weren't like, well, relationships are unicorns and butterflies and throw some glitter on if things suck. But it was, I just want for this to be something where there's love, where there isn't pain, where there isn't this thing that feels irreparable. I don't even know if that's a word, but non-repairable, I suppose, if that's the right word. And so it was, it just sounds like it's a really grief heavy space to have to sit in. And I can imagine that was overwhelming in the midst of it. And because you're still not wanting to be the person that's like walking away, quitting, not doing something, but it was hard and it's scary. And now it's taking away something that you maybe wanted for yourself, or it's at least calling into question something because you realize it might not be what you were told it would be.
Yeah, totally. You nailed it. I think that I actually had to have someone say to me, you're grieving. Like, this is kind of a grieving process now. And to kind of put that into context, like our situation was, my partner has a teenage son who suddenly moved into our house, and we were all hands on deck, fully aligned with everything, my partner and I. And to like know that I have that nurturing side in me. That's like all I wanted to give this person, and had the ability to give him in the past, not as like closely under the same roof wise, but like really wanting to cultivate that safe space and pour my energy into, that nurturing, loving side of myself to this person. And knowing that was kind of labeled as stepmom role, which, could get very overwhelming at times, but I didn't try to sit in that label. Like, it was just trying to be who I am as a person, I feel, to anybody that would be in a struggling situation and we would need to help out or something. Obviously, this is a bit bigger than that and heavier than that, as it's my partner's child. And yeah, once stuff kind of got complicated and he ended up having to leave our house, like it really was. I think it was a friend or my mom to say to me, like, you are in a grieving period. And I finally got to the point where I told my partner that, because I really was so open and ready and loving to be this role and this person for him. But when it was kind of like all of the sudden, like truly very suddenly kind of had to shift and it was gone, it was like where the fear came in was fear that I didn't do enough, fear that I didn't love enough, nurture enough. So then that does kind of shake up my idea of like, could I do this in the future with my own kid? I know that is different because you are starting from, zero. I met my partner's son at 12, 13. So that was still like just on the edge of that, like teenage shift for a person. But I think it felt good to like meet him in that younger setting and kind of like step into that role in that way. But then when it kind of got heavier with under the same roof aspect and like really shifting all of our dynamics, and then it just, as quickly as it was here, it was as quickly as it was gone. And I didn't realize how hard that would feel for everyone, I'm sure, but I'm just personally speaking from my own experience. And I think that I didn't know that it really would make me ask the question, do I want this for myself? Like, I didn't think that situation would shift like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I think there's a couple components. So what you described, that specific fear is shame, the shame of not being good enough, not being loving enough, not being deserving of being a mom because you can't cut it. And it's interesting how that was so quickly written for you. And I say this again as two people that function from a very similar MO of our job is to take care of everybody else at all costs. And that's not something, I mean, I used to have a lot of pride in that, and I've learned to release that because that's a protective nature. That is a defense mechanism that's been built on the belief that if I'm not performing at that level at all times, I will be rejected. I will not be loved. I am not good enough unless I can basically deceive everybody into thinking that I am worthy of being in the room. And now you're holding this where, and it sounds to me like a kid who had a story before you came in, had 12 years of their story, that even as you collect the details or even superficial kind of level pieces of information, you weren't there in those 12 years. And so you're trying to make sense of a story that you only have bits and pieces of that are really likely false memories. And not saying people are lying, but our brains all create different memories and different ways of interpreting things. And so we know that everything is some way connected to the reality, but also not, because our brains are constantly trying to write a story that we can exist and function in. So you're getting all these pieces and you're meeting people 12 years into being parents, 12 years into being on this earth, and you can't really know for sure everything that went into the story up until then. So you're just like, I guess, and you kind of go in
filling in the gaps as I could, but that's
and you were picking up on gaps that had likely been there for that whole time. And a kid who likely has their own needs that you couldn't solve. But again, your brain is, if I can just be loving enough, if I can just be there, if I can be consistent, if I can be X, Y, and Z. I do this all the fucking time. Like, as the shame specialist therapist, I'm like, my 3-year-old's never going to do this because we talk about our emotions and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I have been lovingly humbled on a lot of occasions, but then it turns to shame really quickly because I'm supposed to be able to help them. And the outcome, exactly. The outcome is supposed to be better.
Yep.
This is supposed to be the fix because this is what's missing.
Yep.
But part of the issue is you probably weren't the one that they needed it from. Mm-hmm. And if they had 12 years of building a story that there wasn't safety to take it from someone, or if it was a consistency issue that they don't know how long they can predict you're going to be there.
Yep. Why
would they let you in? So you become another enemy because their brain goes, the safest place to be is alone. And the best way to do that is to find ways to detach from the world. For some kids and adults, that's substances. For some of us, that's just complete isolation. For some of us, it is, eating disorders and other addictions, whatever it is. But we find ways to detach from the world because we feel like that is the only safe place to be because everyone is going to let you down. Mm-hmm. And when somebody has that story, I mean, even as a therapist, I can't fucking do anything for people that are deep in that story either. So it's a high task to give yourself. And it's one that's never going to be checked off, but you try anyways. And then the interesting thing is now you feel this. I could imagine it's not only the shame of feeling like you weren't able to give them everything that you thought would help fix it, but now you're grieving do I want this? What's my life going to be? And you're grieving the fact that you want to love your partner who's trying to love their kid. Oh, yeah. But you now have your own emotions about this. Mm-hmm. And now you don't know what you and your partner want moving forward, but you don't also want to take away from their opportunity if they want to have a different parenting experience. So you're holding everything for everyone. Mm-hmm. And yet still trying to move forward with the world being like, oh my gosh, but you're, of the birthing age. So like, don't you want to have kids? Oh my God, it's like so great. And you're going to like really regret it if you don't have them now. You're going to be such a good
It's mom. Humbling. It's really nice.
Yeah, exactly. And so
I've been humbled, trust me.
So how, tell me, as I'm saying all of this, I'm just kind of talking through it. What comes up for you?
Honestly, everything you were just saying, it put me back in that moment. It was so interesting to come out of that situation. It obviously took a couple months before I felt a little more clear in my mind and took a step back from everything and realized how much I was spiraling in everything, in all of that, in the shame of it, in the trying to give it my all, trying to communicate and set the right boundaries with my partner and how we talk about this, and now setting boundaries with just what their relationship looks like and what then my relationship with his son will look like. It's so different now. And moving forward, I think a lot of it is also just the unknown. So the unknown of what that looks like down the line with him and I, and what that looks like for my partner and him, and how that is mended in a way. And I think I finally gotten to a good place where it was I really do need to put some boundaries up and kind of take a step back and let my partner be the one to really handle whatever it does look like moving forward. But yeah, so I don't think I realized how much I was truly diving into head first, that nurturing role. And that's all I was doing. So it's if I wasn't doing that, I was crying to my mom because of how overwhelmed it felt and how I didn't feel like I was doing enough. I didn't feel like I was equipped with what I could provide for this child, for this kid. It was wild to be a couple months out from the situation and look back to how dark it was going to get in my own head, in my own space pretty soon, because I was so wanting to really give all that, my full energy and full attention. But obviously you can't do that with anything in life. You got to kind of dabble here and there. And personally, me, it's just I could go all in and then go to a pretty dark spot if it wasn't working, if I wasn't seeing the results to what I thought I was putting into it. And maybe that sounds silly to say because that's a lifelong thing. There's not going to be results, but I just thought that it could shift something for that person. And it could have, but it it was also such a tornado. So for everyone, and not just for me. And that was discussed throughout the household of how hard this can be for everyone, and like try to get on the same page. So when it all goes to shit, it's like, oh damn, like what did I do? What did I not do that could have fixed that? And then you really kind of spiral in those thoughts. But I think I really just had to get honest with myself and tell myself, like, you did what you really could do. You really, none of this came from a spot of not caring enough or any of that. Right. So I think it was so interesting once I was a couple months out to see how like unhealthy that can be sometimes. Like, you think you're doing this wonderful thing. You think that love and care and nurturing, like all of that can be such a great thing, but it can also, if you're not doing it in a certain healthy way for yourself too, it can be so unhealthy in the long run.
Yeah. I think just sort of recognizing it's not like you didn't know this about yourself, but it sounds like it really, I mean, we all kind of have those experiences. I got to a point, gosh, I want to say it was like 6 months ago. And I was calling Jess, our very good friend / my sister-in-law. And I was like, I'm pretty sure we need to call CPS. Like, I think I'm the worst mom on the planet. Like I had like picked up Everly at one point because she just was like trying to throw tantrums at something. And I moved her into another room and I was like, what if I picked her up too hard? And like, I had made I had a laundry list of why I was like the world's worst mom. And when I dove into it, sure, you could look at it specifically to being a parent is hard, but this was just the moving of my shame from one thing to another. Because if it wasn't being her mom, it was being a business owner. If it wasn't being a business owner, it was being a partner. It was being a friend. It was being a daughter. It was being whatever these things were. So there's this idea of I can handle it all. I can do it all. I can be the one that people can count on. And so this dynamic brought it into focus for you, just how unhelpful this trait can be if you don't start to regulate it.
Yes.
But my guess is this is a trait that you've been doing probably since you were a kid.
Oh, yes. I think it's like that motherhood in its own, right? Like you can speak to that. It's like it becomes this all-consuming thing. So if it's like this all-consuming thing, of course you're going to feel shame if one little thing isn't going to align how you think it should, or be, be fixed or whatever, in quotations.
Right.
Because it just becomes, it's like it becomes your whole existence. And when that is your whole existence and one little part of that is not, fitting in the puzzle how you want it to, it feels like I'm doing it all wrong. Everything's wrong. I'm feeling shameful about this because I fucked up. Right.
I mean, so whenever I'm teaching about or talking about shame, my favorite thing to talk through now it's called the drama triangle. And they actually used it to look at interpersonal dynamics in family situations or kind of unhealthy attachments with people. But I like to think about it as kind of the three roles we go to when we're in shame. So there's the hero, the victim, and the villain. And hero, when I think about it from a shame perspective, is not I'm better than everyone. It's I have to be everything for everyone. I have to be the one with the solution. I have to be the one that can carry the 8 bags of groceries in the house so that I don't need any help. I have to be the person that everyone knows is going to be okay because I can be strong. They can't. And so you start to kind of play this role of assuming responsibility for everything and everyone. The villain is then anytime something goes wrong, it's probably your fault. Somebody walks into a work meeting and someone gives them the stink eye. It's got to be because you fucked up in some way, instead of being like, maybe they had a bad day. Maybe they're upset about some other thing. Maybe they were just rubbing their eye a second ago and they looked in a direction and they're not upset, but I'm writing a story that's not there. Then there's the victim side, which is basically, so the hero and the villain are pretty much both trying to control everything. You are in control of everything and responsible for everything. And then the victim side is I can't control anything. I fail at everything. I suck. Everything is terrible. And when we're in shame, we basically just ping pong back and forth between those three spots. And so it sounds like that is a place you've existed where, and it comes down to control and feeling like you need to be able to control things. but also again, sort of a safety perspective, because if the fault is me, that's safer because then I can work on it. I can fix it. The rejection feels different if a relationship doesn't work out because it was that I just didn't work hard enough. I can fix it and then it'll be better. Mm-hmm. But we also take away a lot of responsibility and control of other people. But particularly, I think the responsibility piece is interesting because my guess is if we went back to other relationships, friends, family, whatever, and where you have experienced this, where you've assumed these roles, you've taken on this unfair responsibility. If we looked at it from a different lens, it's highly likely that control and responsibility also fell on other people.
Right.
But again, it would just be if you can elevate above that, it's less painful because this now becomes your predictable shittiness. I can exist in my head telling myself I'm not good enough and working on something all the time. At least it gives me a false sense of movement that I can keep learning. But it's really hard to swallow that sometimes people are just assholes, or sometimes people just can't be helped, or sometimes relationships, even I had to really relinquish this with a lot of my family, particularly as my grandma was dying last year, of like a lot of relationships that we're told are supposed to be something aren't. And that's really hard because it's never going to make sense. And that kind of grief is really hard. And now you're thinking about bringing a human into the world. Mm-hmm. And that reality hits in a different way. What if that relationship is one that I know logically I can't control, but I'm going to want to because I'm afraid of that rejection. I'm afraid of that irreparable experience. I'm afraid of not being able to have the connection with them or them not being able to have the connection with me that I believe humans deserve, because I've seen too many times, if I'm honest with myself, that it doesn't work. And I can't stop that from happening, even if I wish I could.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think this did just bring this up for me. So like, I think around that too, it's like this situation with my partner and his son, it's like that has shifted my perspective on kids and like just like what that looks like in 12 whatever 15 years down the line, like being in the middle of it at the starting point there, and then being in a dynamic with my own dad right now. It's like I'm in a dynamic with my own parent where it's like I'm having to adjust the way of that thinking, because I'm like, if I'm having these struggles with my dad at almost 30 years old, oh my gosh, it's like, well, what happens if I have my kid and then they're 30 years old and then I fucked up in a way where I have to, it's like, it's such a weird spiral thing where it's on it's like on this both ends of the spectrum. It's like, I had this experience with he's not a child, but it's like still a kid. And then you go the other way and it's your own parent and thinking of how they've parented you. And now you're trying to work through this stuff. And that takes me down this path of like, it could be like that too. It's like, it doesn't just have to be teenage years. It's like you're well into your adulthood having these different unhealthy dynamics, and that could happen to me. I have a kid and then I have this dynamic with that child or my own child way down the line. So yeah, it really like shifts stuff for me and like makes me think of it in a whole new way, and just being afraid of the shame of it. It's like people have their opinions, people have their expectations of what you think you should do. And because you're this kind, nurturing person to me as an adult, or you said like, I can be that way to your child. It's like, because people see me acting in that way, it's like, well, of course you're going to have a kid. And I don't know. I keep making the joke just to make it easier for myself, not to be like, I don't want to dive into this conversation and tell you the truth of, I don't think I want kids right now, but like, so I keep saying the joke, because I'll be turning 30. And I'm like 29-year-old Morgan does not want kids.
Yep.
Ask her when she's 30. That's just like what I keep saying to people if I get that question asked to me these days. Well, that's been my own scapegoat from it.
And I like it. It's also like, it's such an uncomfortable thing. One of my other friends and she does not want kids. She has solidly known she doesn't want kids since she was, I think, a teenager, maybe even younger. And she is very similar to you in terms of her nurturing ability. She's so good with kids. She's taught kids swim lessons. She's done all these things, and people would always do this. And she's 38 now. So she's kind of like on the other side of it, where people stop asking questions about, oh my gosh, you should have kids. And now it's, oh, could you not have kids?
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, could you not, you know what? And so there's
you.
Exactly. So it's either this, and it's a projection. It's the same, you know, and I think whether or not to have kids is a much different and painful and difficult experience. I mean, I was 7, 8, I could have even been 9 months pregnant with Ev. And I was like, I'm not so sure. I'm really not sure. I have days now where I'm like,
is this real life?
Yeah. like if I didn't have to do a snack time or read a book or talk through a tantrum for like a month, I'd be okay. And for me, it's been the realization of the grief of, and maybe this happened to you with your situation too. I remember one day in the car with Jordan where I was like, I'm never gonna get to be selfish again. Not that I ever was like selfish in a negative, I guess, bad way, but I was selfish. I could choose to sleep in. Yeah. I could choose to spend my day however. I could choose to have a plan or not have a plan. I could choose to eat 3 cupcakes, knowing I'm going to feel like crap for the rest of the day, and I'm going to want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, but I could do that. Mm-hmm. I don't even want to get a cold now because of what that would mean about having to not have my schedule function with this other human. And
with the human, yes.
Yes, exactly. It's not, she doesn't dictate it, but she is a part of it. And I don't ever get to be like,
you can do that yourself. Yeah,
exactly. Even when she can. Exactly. It's like, I don't want to wipe your ass today. Like, I want you to be able to wipe your own butt or to let somebody else do it, but I can't. And so there's this idea of that's really, really tricky, but that's relationships in general. I think, right. You know, like you're getting married, like there are some days that not having a partner would be so much fucking easier. Mm-hmm. So much easier. There would be some days not having friends, not having to think about other people would be easier. Mm-hmm. But it's the idea of thinking about relationships and connections and the ones we want to show up for, even when it's hard. And I think that's the question we don't get to ask ourselves. So when you think about becoming a parent, it's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And right. Then after I had Everly, I mean, I still get this. I get this from people. Now it's mostly jokes, you know, like the mother-in-law joke every once in a while, because she very much respects my decision, but she'll do the like, just think if you had another one like her, like she's so great. And I'm like, but they wouldn't, because I'd lose my fucking mind because I cannot have another one in my life. Like I'm really good 94% of the time at this role. If I had 2, we're going to split that in half because I have nothing more to give to this.
Exactly.
So it's the same, like, well, you had 1 kid, so don't you want more? And like the pressure.
You know how to do this now, exactly. Duh. So you should feel fine in that role.
Exactly. From 1 to 2 isn't that big of a transition. Mm-hmm. And so it's that piece where I think people are projecting onto you the stories that they need to be true because they're still operating under those check boxes. Either they already have, and they're the people with 2 and 3 kids, and they're still not totally sure that they wanted to do it, but they need to know that everybody else is falling in line and doing the same thing.
Having that
feel
decision.
Better. Exactly. Yes. If you break out and you say, well, I don't know if I want them. Mm-hmm. Just the idea of that is a threat to the system that shame functions on, because we're all feeling like we have to be in the system. Just the idea of saying, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I think I was pushed to do the, I don't know about that, because people kept asking me, or like because of the situation that I was in, like close family members were the ones that knew it most. And you get that, well, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same situation because you'd start from scratch. You'd start from day one. Right. So of course, like you can start from scratch. Why wouldn't you want kids? Because you can start from the beginning. Right. I'm like, I just don't know. Like that kind of really did set me up to stop and think about it for myself. Cause that was still my like narrative brain. Like I've always had this narrative in my head. Like I've always wanted this, I think, whatever. But people posing that question to me, I was like, thank you for saying that. I don't really know if I want to do that.
Yeah. And to be okay with that. And I think that's the idea of like, you can have a full life with or without kids. You can have a full life with or without a life partner. You can have a full life with or without $100,000 a year job. Like it is all about, and this is something I think you really strive to do. And as I've gotten to know you more, I see that it is really your attempt to combat so much of the shame that you've held on to for years, as you really try to bring a sense of mindfulness and peace into your life, given whatever context it is. And that's a really hard thing to do when shame is telling you, but here I have the list of all the ways that you're not good enough yet. And so you need to be doing all of these things. And so now this is just saying, what does a full life feel like for me? And I don't know if you ever did you watch the Bridgerton series on Netflix?
No, I didn't.
So the first series, it's a whole book series too. And I read all the books because I love reading trauma. I actually learned this as a trauma brain response. I love trashy, not even trashy, but like the predictable rom-com novels where like, of course there's like, 6 pages that are a little uncomfortable and you hope nobody looks over your shoulder because they'll see like words that it's like, are you reading porn essentially on the pages? But the rest of them, it's the story, it's really about the story, but it's the reason I love them is everything follows a formula. So everything works out. At the end, they're going to be together. That everything's going to be fine. And that predictability is really nice because the unpredictability and the chaos for me, it had a lot to do with insecure attachment with my parent figure. It's just nice to know things could work out. Well, in the first Bridgerton book, the main character, there's 2 characters, the male and the female character, I guess they're the protagonists, maybe. I don't really know. I don't know enough about stories. They're 2 main characters, but they end up getting married and there's like a whole bunch of webs and things, but he tells her from the beginning he can't give her kids. And that's what she wanted. And there's like it's English scandal and like old time things. And so they end up having to get married and blah, blah, blah. But he tells her that they can't have kids. Well, she doesn't know anything about how kids are even come to be because they don't apparently talk about this till you're married off. So she doesn't realize that he could have kids, but he's choosing not to. So he basically pull out methods, the whole thing for months. And then she learns, well, it turns out that the whole thing was that he hated his father and he made a vow before his dad died that his line would end with him, that he wasn't going to pass on his name. And so it's a decision that was made from a place of righteous anger and pain.
Spite.
Exactly. And I think the reason why because you haven't made a declaration on if you want kids or not. I think what you're doing is saying, if I didn't have kids right now, or if I said I didn't want kids, there's a part of it that would be out of spite. Maybe because of your relationship with your dad, maybe because of this whole situation with your partner. Maybe because of the kind of bucking back against society now and kind of seeing just how intense it is. And there might be a part of it that's completely authentically you. In fact, that could be the majority, but at least 1% would be spite related. You have to grieve. You have to feel all of this. And you have to, at least for me, I've learned, and I push this hard as a therapist, you have to completely release the idea that you want something that you've told yourself your whole life you want, so you can figure out if the you that's here now at almost 30 actually wants this. Because you at 10 did. Yeah. You at 15 did. You at 25 did.
Yep.
You at 29 isn't sure. And you at 30 might not. And so it really is about saying that piece could have been a part of my story and I can grieve it if it's not anymore. That doesn't take away my love to be a nurturer.
Yes.
It means that I want to nurture in ways that fulfill me, not just doing it to fulfill some standard for other people.
Right. And even just going through that grieving process of shut that door for now. So like I said, 29-year-old Morgan just wants to shut that door and go through that grieving process because of the situation I went through. And then, I have the choice. It's my door. I can open that door again if I want to.
Right.
I might lose the key for a little while, but I could probably dig it up and find it or just break the door down and then do what I want. Right. So I think the biggest thing for me, my huge gratitude around this whole situation also comes from my partner, because I came into that relationship. It's been years now together. And I came into that relationship knowing he had a child fully being like, I'm nurturing Morgan. I love that role. Like I can do that role. Right. So knowing that he already had that, but then my narrative of like, well, I know I want kids. So like, I need to have a partner who is like willing to do that for me down the road. And we've always had that discussion. So like having a partner who always wanted to keep that door open for me was like very helpful, but it also kind of set me in that narrative. Like, this is what I want. And he's going to leave that door open. And then now having to kind of get out of the shame of it. I really wasn't ready to say, I'm going to shut the door for now, because I was stuck in the shame of it. I was stuck in the, well, if I say that, if I'm going to shut the door, I feel shame and then I can't open the door again. And then it's gone forever. So it's like shifting that and now feeling so comfortable in myself saying, I'm not sure right now. I'm not totally open to that at the moment. I'm going to close the door. And like, again, if people keep pushing that out in society and asking the question, ask me when I'm 30. Like, So it's been, I am grateful to have a person I can go there with, because I think that's hard for a lot of people. You get those conversations are hard.
And when they suck.
They really do. And like when you go through something so intense as we did, it's like, oh shoot, are we going to like not talk about this anymore? I'm grateful that we really, throughout all this, we always came back to each other. We always came back to each other with discussion and open-mindedness. And, again, like you said, it's a lot of people, there's so many different things that happen with women when it comes to having kids and when it comes to the decision and when it comes to if you can or you cannot. And like, it's not this one label. It's not this one door. There's so many doors to this. And I think it's taken me about a year to even be able to speak that sentence to you. And because I'm a little more out of the shame of it, but that shame might come back and that shame might leave forever. You just don't know. And to just be honest with myself and not let others dictate my decision-making has been really important.
Yeah. And I think what a powerful place to be in. And I think to give yourself the space to know too, that it's not even just what other people think, but it's also not allowing past Morgan or future Morgan to weigh in on a decision right now either.
Yes.
Because future Morgan might want kids and might not want kids. Past Morgan at least believed she wanted kids. And so it's allowing all three of those versions of you to exist without having to have them align. And I think that is such a key piece. And it's also knowing that it's okay for us to try on different ideas. Jordan bought this otoscope so Ev and I both had these colds. I ended up with a sinus infection. She can't like hear very well right now. And so of course I'm anxious human. Like she's lost her hearing forever. I'm like panicked. It's mostly like she's got swelling because she's got sinus issues. So he got this like little kid's otoscope that has a camera so we can see it on his phone. And he was like going in and he was showing us the inside of our ears. And I had to leave. I started gagging and I was like, I can't fucking believe that I spent like 15 plus years selling myself on the idea that I was going to be a doctor. I would be so like, I can't even look on the inside of someone's ears without thinking it is disgusting. Like I have little floaters in my eyes and I know that down the road you could end up having to have cataract surgery. And I was like, how does anybody even want to look in an eye? That's disgusting. Are you kidding me? And so there's this, but it's the idea of saying, I don't know if I truly wanted it or not. And probably for you, there's some mixture of, the past Morgan that was like, society told me so. I also think I like this. And so it's probably a bit of you, a bit of everybody else. That there was a period of time that's what I wanted. And it's okay that it changed. It's okay that there were these painful realities that made it look different, but it's realizing there is no like one size fits all for our life to be fulfilling. It's just the decision that we give ourselves to be okay with making the choices now that line up with who we are, how we want to show up, the values that we have, and honestly, the time and energy that we can give to it in the moment. And it's recognizing for you, you are going to have to be okay disappointing people, including the possibility of disappointing future Morgan.
Yes.
And, and your future partner. Like that is, it has to be something that we're okay with, because all disappointment is a misalignment of priorities and values.
Yeah.
Other people have a priority in seeing you become a mom because their life would feel more fulfilled.
Yes.
Other people want to see you do this because they've projected onto you that that is who you need to be okay. But the Morgan that I know has worked really hard to be okay, whatever the bullet point lists of who she is and how she shows up in the world are. And so this is just a new layer of you doing that, regardless of if the you at 29 or the you at 34, or the you at 42 has a child or not. I hope that you continue to give yourself that love and grace, because you are, in that way, you're nurturing people in a sense that I don't think you realize, because that's the part people need. That's the part we need to come back to. Is love is about what you said, with you and your partner coming back every single day to each other. It's about continually showing back up and being willing to sit in the shit and have the hard conversations and just to be present. And not only are you doing that with him, but you're learning to do that with yourself in this situation, to say, gosh, I need to feel, I need to grieve, I need to be angry, I need to cry, I need to reject the world around me. And then just decide, as I move through that, how do I want to use my time to have the kind of impact that I want? And that's the only decision you ever have to make and be okay with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm so happy you said that in the context of like past Morgan and future Morgan, because you know me well enough. I think my monkey mind can really take over quite more than I would like at sometimes, especially under stressful situations. But like when the monkey mind is taking over, it's like all I'm thinking about is the past stuff. And then I'm like thinking of the past stuff to think about the future stuff. And then again, as you said at the beginning, my goal as a person is just to be so intentional about grounding myself in the moment, in the moment thoughts, in the present moment of what is happening in my life right now, and not letting it take me from the past to the future, whatever. But not, and also getting out of the mindset of just because if I don't have kids, that doesn't take away my nurturing ability. Like you said, like I can nurture other things and other people in different ways, and myself in different ways. Like it doesn't take away my ability to be this nurturing human just because I'm not going to be nurturing a child or my child. Like that isn't what that always means. And yeah, I think it does. I think that is a powerful stance. It's like, just because you make that decision, it doesn't take away all of what that means to be a mother or to be a nurturing human. And I think I got stuck in that for a little bit with the situation. Like I was like, I'm not doing it right. Like I'm not actually, it's like, it just, it's scary. And I'm totally okay with admitting how scary that can be and how confused I was. And I think, as cliche as it can sound, it's like in those deepest moments, you really do learn so much about yourself. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot of how to, not let myself get so bogged down and so wrapped up in the past and in the, if I do this, then that means this for the future and X, Y, and Z. So just really, again, being intentional about grounding myself in this moment and not feeling bad about that decision and that way of thinking, and knowing that I'm going to have days where that thinking comes back, but I have to then ground myself out of that.
Yeah, I love that. I wish we could talk for like 6 more hours about this. Obviously, that's.
Don't worry, I'll come visit you and
we'll do a part 2 when we're like in person together. I think that would be wonderful. I love that. And I love kind of thinking about that almost as a way that we would wrap up. So we're recording this before it's going to air. So let's imagine it's 5-6 months from now. You're listening to this episode. What do you want the Morgan in 6 months to hold on to? What do you want her to know? What do you want her to believe in her heart when the door does feel like it's swinging open, or that somebody else is trying to knock it open again? What do you want her to have inside of her to be okay with wherever she's at with the door?
I want that Morgan to feel proud of herself. I really do. I want myself to remember the darkness, like that deep, dark feeling I was in when don't feel like I'm enough. Don't feel like I'm doing this right. Don't feel like I could do this right down the line. Right. And then remember coming out of that and the thoughts I've had and the conversations with myself I've had and the calmness I can feel now when I do say, I don't, I don't know. Right. I want her to feel proud of herself for getting to that point and to know that that will shift, but like being proud of me for not letting the outside chatter do anything to that. Yeah. To make me not feel proud of that, to make me feel like I'm making the wrong decision. Right. So just to really, again, coming back to being grounded in my own decisions, in my own self, whatever that means in the future, but I don't need to think about it because the future has not happened yet.
Exactly. So tell me now, as we come to a close, what's one word you would use to describe how you feel now that we've wrapped?
Calm. No, I do. I feel my anxiety belly is all gone because Kira's amazing. And, but no, content. I calm and content. I feel like, again, I got pretty nervous coming into this conversation because I get nervous and excited doing anything.
Yeah.
It's just who I am and it's what my body does as a response. But I feel the second we started talking, I could feel all of that just kind of melt away. And I feel calm and content of, and reassured really of like where I'm at in my thoughts, my own thoughts. So just like kind of speaking this out loud, I haven't had this conversation for a little bit with myself. I think it was maybe to lead up to this and see where I could
where
go.
We went. Yeah.
Yeah. But just feeling like I'm reminding myself that, those thoughts haven't changed and that feeling hasn't changed of feeling like I can be one with my decision and it's my decision. So.
Yeah. And I think I guess maybe my word would be contemplative. And because so much there's a book called All About Love. If you haven't read it, it's like a chapter. Each chapter is on different topics related to love. But one of the themes in it is this idea of what we learn typically growing up is a system of normalized dysfunction. And so love and connection becomes rooted in what we do or don't do and sort of dysfunctional ways of thinking. The parent that hits their kids and says, well, it's because I love you, and things like that happen that we have to make sense of because that's not what love is. And that's not how love shows up, and love based on condition. And for you and I to both get to a place that we believe that we only deserve for people to stick around if we can do X, Y, and Z means we've developed a belief of conditional love, not unconditional love. And so I think, even as you're talking, that feeling with whether it's your own parents or caregivers, obviously my relationship with my 3-year-old, relationships with friends, with clients, I think the biggest release in general is realizing that every relationship is iterative. Whether it's, I'm sure, and you've experienced this too, even in your partnership, of like the expectation that everything is supposed to constantly be moving and trending upwards and be better and better. And that's just not how any relationship goes. And I think sort of the reminder for all of us, again, whether somebody's listening to this thinking about, do I want kids? Do I not want kids? There are all these other maybe grief relationships that you're thinking about and the grieving that needs to come into loss. And I just actually recorded yesterday. I'm sure the timing won't work out. It could have already been released or it will come up, but there will be, or there already is in some way, an episode on grief. And this grief specialist just talked about how grief is the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. It has nothing to do with death, even though that's what everybody thinks it is.
Right.
But it is that. It is the moving through that. And it is, you will never be through that before you decide whether or not you would want to have a kid. You will never have a kid and feel completely 100% like that's everything you wanted. And you will never not have a kid and feel like it's completely 100% what you wanted. There's always, I think, gray in every decision. We love our partners. We're both in long-term relationships. It's never going to be 100%. That is just the reality of humans because our brains are programmed for that. And so I think the grace of just I sought so much of perfection in relationships. And I think that gets translated for both of us in different ways. It got translated into the idea of being a mom.
Yeah.
And it's realizing that is people in our lives don't need us to be perfect for them. In fact, they don't even need us to do for them most times. What they need is something that you give freely without even being aware of it. And that's empathy. They need your willingness to hear their story and to be there even once they've shared it. And I hope that Morgan, that Kira, in 6-8 months from now, whenever it is that we're listening to this, that we can remind ourselves of that too, that we get so fixated on the actions of what we're doing and the outcomes of those actions instead of really focusing on who we are and the embodiment of those values. And if we can hold that when somebody is disappointed, when we're not making a choice or doing something they think that we should do, that's their story and they get to be in that. But I'm not doing that to be hurtful, harmful, deceitful, unkind. I'm doing it to show love to myself and to everybody else in the best ways I can. And so,
and to just grow through that.
Yeah. Yes.
Personally experiencing that, a lot of growth can come when you really don't think that's going to happen, but it does, through the grief, through the hard times, through the experiences. But down the line, 6 months, I hope that Morgan sees that too, sees the growth, that even if it's like a centimeter, it's still happening. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I love you. Again, I love this. I'm just sitting here. I'm tingly, and you all can't see me, but I'm tingly right in my forehead and I'm tingly in my right armpit, and I am sweating profusely from my left armpit, which means that this was a great conversation.
I was going to say, it happened again. All I can see is the computer screen, and my entire basement is blank. So it worked.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I do. I sincerely, I love you and I love your courage, and thank you for sharing this and giving other people space to take out this feeling and apply it to their own experiences, to know that they have the right to ask questions and to be okay with that. And even if they come to it in painful, traumatic experiences like you did, that it is still a place they are allowed to be at, and to know that it's okay to question things and to hit pause when something happens that they need to grieve. And so thank you. The conversation is a gift to all of us that get the chance to listen to it.
I really appreciate you reaching out to have me for this conversation. And I can't thank you enough for creating a safe space to have these conversations. So thank you so much.
Of course. Well, if you all have questions, comments, things for me, from Morgan, you loved it, make sure that you share this episode with other people. I can't wait to come back next week, drop another episode in your box to let you know about another topic that we're going to hit on as it relates to shame, as we all do our work to write our own stories and untether ourselves from the painful feeling and lies that we've been telling ourselves that we are not enough.